Hey, is it ready yet? How much longer do you expect us to wait? Angry voices from the audience echoed throughout the venue. At a seminar event hosted by our company, we were facing our worst crisis, as no one could communicate in Japanese or English. Marie, the CEO's daughter and the event organizer, could only pale in silence at the incomprehensible language barrier. Uh, um. As the tension grew, I took hold of the microphone, and the entire atmosphere shifted. Who exactly are you? I awoke in an uncomfortable airplane seat and glanced out the window to see a dense cluster of buildings below. The structures that had appeared small and flat were gradually taking shape, and enormous buildings began to emerge. The neon lights of a bustling city resist dawn, with Tokyo Tower in the background. As the dawn began to color the scene, I looked down at the flower-shaped origami in my hand and murmured, "I'm home." I'm Alex, 28 years old. I had returned to Japan. 15 years ago, my parents passed away in a car accident. It was a pileup on the freeway. The car my dad was driving was rear-ended and collided with a tanker truck in front of us. The front of the car was damaged beyond recognition. The news that day prominently featured the crash, using the crumpled driver's and passenger's seats to illustrate the impact. My dad and mom, who were sitting up front, didn't survive, but I, then 13 years old, managed to survive in the back seat. We were on our way to visit my sister, who was hospitalized in a large hospital in the city. My sister Lily, 2 years younger than me, was born with a heart condition and had been in and out of the hospital numerous times. That day, I remember Dr. Thompson saying Lily was doing better and would probably be discharged temporarily the following week. While our parents spoke with Dr. Thompson, Lily and I played with origami. On the drive home, the mood was bright, and we talked about celebrating her discharge with cake and what kind of food to prepare. It all happened in an instant. In the aftermath, I was left holding the morning glory flower Lily had folded that day. With both my dad's parents already gone, it was decided that my maternal grandmother would take in me and my sister. But caring for a middle schooler and a sister in and out of the hospital proved overwhelming for her, as she lived alone. In the meantime, I apparently retreated into myself, traumatized by the accident. My memories from that period are hazy. It was Kevin, my uncle, Mom's younger brother, who reached out to me. Uncle Kevin, who traveled frequently for work, was always busy, and I barely knew him. Still, my mother had often spoken of him as a close friend and a brother she was proud of. "Alex, how about coming with me to see the world?" He looked at me standing before my parents' graves, and his expression was resolute. For a man who enjoyed his single life, taking on the responsibility of raising a middle schooler must have been a huge commitment. After that, we truly traveled all over, to country after country. In some places, we stayed a year, while in others, less than 3 months. Uncle Kevin never let me lack for anything financially, but he preferred to leave me to my own devices, not offering much guidance. At first, the emotional shock and the sudden change overwhelmed me, but gradually, I started reaching out to the world around me. Lily remained with my grandmother in Japan, continuing her cycle of hospital visits. First, she lost our parents, and then her brother left for overseas. The loss must have been intense for an 11-year-old. When I returned to Japan once a year, Lily would cling to me with joy. No matter how much time passed, she was like the little girl she was at 11, and on the day I'd leave, she'd cry, trying to suppress her sobs with a flushed face. I would always promise her, wiping away her falling tears, "Once I can work, I'll definitely come back for you, Lily." In return, she would hand me an origami flower, as if placing all her hopes into that little paper charm. I'm going to work in Japan and live with Lily. I thought of it as both my dream and my mission. Considering Lily's health, I needed a stable income and a solid foundation for our life together. Following Uncle Kevin's advice to finish my education, I enrolled in an American university and graduated in 4 years. My job search naturally centered on Japan-based companies. Now finally, Lily and I could live together. When I called to tell her the news, her voice was the happiest I'd ever heard. But just as everything seemed to be coming together, a new virus swept across the world, making it nearly impossible to leave America. Days went by in helpless frustration, until the worst happened. Lily is. My grandmother's faint voice over the phone felt distant and surreal. Lily, who had been told it would be a miracle to live until 20, had reached her limit. Her heart simply couldn't go on any longer. I couldn't even attend the funeral, so I wasn't able to say goodbye to the only family I had left. After canceling my job offer in Japan, I ended up staying in America, working here, and even when travel restrictions were lifted, I couldn't bring myself to return to Japan. I still can't accept a world without Lily in it. Then this year, I was assigned to the Japan office, and after 7 long years, I finally returned to Japan. Welcome home, Alex. After finishing some paperwork for my new place, I headed to my grandmother's house in the evening. She seemed smaller than I remembered, more fragile. You'll stay for dinner, right? Ah, but first, you should say hello to everyone, she said, trying to fuss over me as she always did. Her gaze drifted toward the back room. Inside was the family altar, with photos of my parents and a smiling young girl. For a moment, the world seemed to spin. Who is this? The pounding in my ears felt overwhelming. Unable to bear the sudden tightness in my chest, I muttered an excuse and hurried out of the house. Walking through the crowded streets, I struggled to steady my racing heart as night fell completely. The lights in Tokyo were so bright, and the crowd so dense, that it made me wonder how people managed to live in such a packed city. In this sea of faces, it felt like Lily could be somewhere here, too. It was a comforting thought. The sticky June air reminded me of the seasons back home. With a hard seltzer I'd picked up at a convenience store in hand, I wandered aimlessly through the streets. Only in Japan could I get away with something like this. I stopped, finally able to breathe again, and found myself near a narrow alley in the nightlife district. Then, I heard a voice shout, "Let go of me." I looked over and saw a woman being hassled by a man. With a smug grin, the man held tightly to the woman's arm as she raised her voice, trying to break free. Yet, people around only stole glances, avoiding involvement. This wasn't exactly a safe area, so maybe scenes like this were just everyday occurrences here. While I was debating whether to intervene, the man walked past me, leading the woman further down the alley. Then a familiar scent caught my attention, stopping me cold. I knew this scent. Lily. I dashed into the alley where the man and the woman had disappeared. The man, startled by my sudden appearance, went pale as I grabbed him by the collar, my voice full of rage. I yelled at the man like a madman, my eyes surely wild and bloodshot. Pathetically, he turned and ran off without much of a fight. I turned immediately and embraced Lily tightly. "I'm so sorry I was late, Lily. I'm so sorry." The smell of antiseptic and that familiar hospital scent clung to her. "Yeah, it's Lily. You're really alive." I held her even tighter, tears of joy welling up. As I held her tighter, Lily stiffened in my arms and suddenly began struggling. "Let go of me." The moment I loosened my grip, a shock exploded across my cheek. "Get away, you creep." The sting of her slap registered just as I realized the voice was unfamiliar. Who is this woman? Before me stood a stranger. She seemed about Lily's age, but she looked nothing like her. Her eyes were filled with confusion, anger, and fear as she glared at me. "I'm sorry, I mistook you for my sister. Of course, Lily couldn't be here. I knew that. I knew. Your sister? I don't get it. Are you insane?" The woman's face twisted with disgust as she turned and stormed off. I can smell that again in the lingering scent of the woman walking away. It stuck stubbornly in my nose because of the humid air. Really, what's wrong with me? Maybe my senses were dulled by that ridiculously strong drink I'd bought earlier. For a while, I couldn't bring myself to move. The following Monday was my first day at the Japan branch's office. My role was to promote our company's medical products at events and seminars. I was assigned here for 1 to 2 years to help expand our market share in Japan and globally. "Alex, I'd like you to assist with our upcoming seminar and event preparations. This is the project lead, Marie." As Luke, my supervisor, introduced me to Marie, we both froze, staring at each other. Luke left after a brief talk, and an odd tension lingered between us. I'm really sorry about the other day," I said first, breaking the silence. "I know it was a case of mistaken identity. But I made you feel unsafe, and I deeply regret that." I was the first to speak. Bowing my head in apology to Marie, the woman I had mistaken for Lily, and hugged. Never did I imagine the weirdo from the other night would turn out to be a transfer from our headquarters. Should I be calling the police? I'm truly sorry. I know this sounds like an excuse, but I just arrived in Japan, was jet-lagged, and admittedly had a bit to drink that night. Even as I said it, I knew how poor an excuse it was. Marie let out a quiet sigh. "You can stop apologizing. I could definitely smell the alcohol on you that night. Being drunk isn't an excuse, but whatever your intentions. I did end up being helped out of a bad situation. So I won't be saying anything about it. You are a competent helper from the headquarters. If you perform well on the job, I really don't care about your character. But just keep your distance." She made it clear she didn't trust me, but she truly never brought up the incident again. With her steady eyes, impeccable makeup, and wavy hair, Marie seemed every bit the competent professional and looked nothing like Lily. From that awful first meeting on, I never again caught that strange scent of antiseptic around her. After a few days, I learned from co-workers that she was our branch manager Tom's daughter. Our company wasn't the type to hand out jobs to family members, though. Marie had joined as a regular new hire, passing all the interviews and even facing her father in the final round. Apparently, Tom hadn't known his daughter was interviewing until she stood in front of him. Marie's track record was impressive, and at just 26, she'd already managed several projects. Knowing a woman Lily's age was thriving like this made me proud for her, but it also made my heart ache for my sister, who never had that chance. I found myself seeking connections between Marie and Lily, but I forced the thought out of my head and focused on my work. After about 2 months at the branch, Marie's initial wariness toward me seemed to ease. Today, we had a meeting with the representatives from a partner company for an upcoming seminar. This was my first time meeting the partner team. When I asked Marie about the contact person, she replied, "Don't expect any useful input from them for this event. Let's just get through it and wrap up quickly." Her tone was almost dismissive. I'm surprised at her unexpected remark. Though we'd only worked together for a couple of months, Marie didn't strike me as someone who looked down on others. Puzzled, I walked into the meeting room, and the contact from the partner company greeted me. The moment he spoke, I suddenly understood Marie's tone, and everything made sense. Alex? Is that really you, Alex? This was the first thing he said in response to my greeting. Working in America, I find business etiquette and language are generally more relaxed than in Japan, which initially threw me off when using Japanese business formalities. Well, to be honest, it still does. Even so, I couldn't help but frown when he leaned in close and blurted out his greeting like that. Have we met somewhere before? I asked politely, suppressing a frown, but he just looked at me like I was crazy for not recognizing him. It's me, Brandon from middle school. You remember, right? We were in the same class in 7th grade. And I was the one who stayed friends with you until you dropped out. His smug grin jogged my memory just enough to finally recognize him. Oh, right, Brandon. It's been a while. I never expected to see you here at work. I only have vague memories of middle school, honestly. I got into an accident before the summer break of my first year, then left Japan with my uncle that winter. My time in Japanese middle school was so short that I didn't have any close friends. After I got out of the hospital and went back to school, most people treated me like I was fragile, while a few others seemed almost eager to ask questions about the accident. Brandon was one of those guys. You basically stopped showing up and left without saying goodbye. We thought you might have, well, been so upset after your parents passed that you couldn't handle it. The way he smirked as he spoke suggested it had always been a joke to him. But I never thought you'd end up working at that company. Are you just a temp or something? I mean, you were a middle school dropout, right? So, what's your highest education? Elementary school. Wow, this is a first. I was so baffled by Brandon's smug ignorance that I was momentarily speechless. Anyway, let me take charge here and make sure you don't drag Marie down. Marie, leave him to me. He suddenly turned to Marie, putting on a showy, needless display of bravado. His intentions were painfully obvious, and his lack of professionalism was beyond annoying. When I opened my mouth, ready to move things along. If I may, Marie cut in, her voice calm but firm, our company only hires college graduates. Alex is an employee of our American headquarters. And technically, I'm the one who should be learning from him. I'm sure there's much you could learn from Alex as well. While we do hire only college graduates, I personally don't think academic background defines a person. After all, having a degree doesn't necessarily mean one has integrity. Marie didn't even look at Brandon as she spoke. Before he could stammer a response, I nudged us back on track, noting that we were pressed for time. Marie politely said, "Apologies," and smoothly transitioned us back to the business at hand. Throughout the rest of the meeting, his colleague, Logan, was the one apologizing on Brandon's behalf, while Brandon sat in silent irritation, failing to hide his annoyance. After the meeting, when it was just Marie and me, I spoke up. Marie, thank you for earlier. You didn't need to get involved, though. Won't it make things harder between the companies? I feel bad since I'm the one who ended up complicating things. Technically, this was a joint event, but Marie was the one in charge. Getting into conflicts with a key partner must be a hassle for her. No, please, it wasn't your fault at all, Alex. He's been like that for a while, and I've just had enough. Marie smiled slightly, almost sheepishly, with a hint of humor. Maybe I wasn't very mature about it, she added, shrugging playfully. The lightheartedness made me chuckle. Your last line had a real punch to it. I really can't stand people who judge others without knowing them or who put people down just to feel superior. It was a characteristic, straightforward opinion from her. Although, she continued, when I was a kid, I made snap judgments about people too, especially with everything people would say about my dad. I guess it made me a bit rebellious. But someone told me that wasn't the way to be. They said it to me and to the kids who looked down on me. Don't judge someone by just one part of them. Sounds like a wonderful person. Yes, they really were, she replied softly, lowering her gaze, a trace of sadness crossing her features. After that, daily tasks and event preparations continued smoothly, and Brandon didn't say a word. Actually, it would be more accurate to say he didn't do much of anything at all. He only completed the bare minimum of what was assigned to him. As Marie had pointed out, it seemed unlikely we'd get any useful input from him. It was the day of the seminar. The main audience today was foreign medical professionals interested in working in Japanese healthcare. Japan's healthcare system has an excellent global reputation, and many overseas aspire to work as nurses here. We had registrants from various countries, especially from Asia. 1 hour before the event. Even though Brandon was supposed to have started preparations 2 hours ago, he was nowhere in sight. Some essential materials and equipment were his responsibility. He was in charge of preparing translated documents in multiple languages and recording the seminar in audio for translation playback. This seminar was advertised as open to participants even if they were not fluent in Japanese. In fact, given how challenging medical terminology can be, even for those proficient in English, we highlighted that we'd prepared translation devices tailored to each participant's language. Without these devices, we'd certainly be dealing with complaints from the attendees who registered. I had been calling Brandon repeatedly since earlier, but there was still no answer. His assistant, Logan, had informed us he wouldn't be able to join today due to another event. So Brandon was the only one scheduled to handle our preparations. Since it's a Sunday and the office is closed, contacting Brandon's company is also out of the question. We were hitting dead ends at every turn. With only 30 minutes left, the room was starting to fill with registered participants. The venue was gradually filling up with attendees. 50 people had registered for the day. Though it wasn't a large crowd, this seminar held a vital purpose: collecting data that would aid in the development of electronic medical records in the future. To ensure we could host similar seminars regularly, this one needed to be a success. The time was almost upon us. Seeing Marie's anxious expression, I suggested she start with an introductory greeting and buy us some time while I stepped out to search for solutions. When I returned a few minutes later, I found the situation had already escalated, with participants openly voicing complaints. Hey, are we starting or not? How much longer are you going to keep us waiting? Despite her nerves, Marie was delivering her speech in English, handling the situation admirably. I'm so sorry. Please just give us a little more time, she said apologetically. However, many of the participants were non-English speakers. Noticing Marie's struggle to respond to those approaching her in other languages, I stepped forward and began addressing the audience. My apologies for the delay. We'll be ready shortly, so in the meantime, I'll be happy to take any questions. I made this announcement in English and other languages I could manage. Standing beside me, Marie looked stunned as I spoke in multiple languages, addressing each question and persuading the crowd to give us a bit more time. As we stepped aside, Marie turned to me and said, "Alex, that was amazing. How many languages do you speak?" she asked, her tone a bit excited. Well, I've lived in a few different countries, so including Japanese and English, maybe 6, at least at a conversational level. Definitely not business level, though. Anyway, we still haven't been able to reach Brandon, so what's our next step? Basic conversation was fine, but when it came to medical topics, we still needed Brandon's translation device. Marie sighed, taking out her phone. But something slipped out of her pocket. Marie, you dropped something, is that origami? The item I picked up was a laminated origami flower. Slightly worn around the edges, showing its age. Oh, sorry about that. It's a good luck charm, she replied. It was the flower-shaped origami charm. I couldn't take my eyes off it, and Marie, noticing, gave me a puzzled look. Is something wrong? She asked, a bit curious. Wait. I've got it, she suddenly exclaimed. I'll run to the dollar store next door and grab as much origami paper as they have. She rushed off to the neighboring building. Returning about 10 minutes later, out of breath, Marie began handing out 2 sheets of origami paper to each participant. Alex, could you translate for me as I go over the instructions? She asked. Setting up a camera to project her hands onto the monitor, she began her impromptu origami lesson. We'd like to introduce origami, a traditional Japanese art, which is also used in pediatric wards and rehabilitation settings. With that introduction, the impromptu origami lesson began. Though often thought of as a children's pastime, origami is actually used in medical and caregiving contexts in Japan. By engaging both hands and encouraging mental focus, origami offers simple yet effective rehabilitation exercises that can increase in complexity as skills progress. Including these explanations, the origami session surprisingly captured the participants' interest. As they followed the folding steps, everyone seemed genuinely focused and even enjoying themselves. Midway through, Logan from the partner company arrived with the translation device, allowing us to proceed with the seminar as planned. The seminar finished about 30 minutes behind schedule. On the way out, I felt relieved seeing a female participant smiling as she held up a slightly crooked origami crane with pride. After the attendees had left, the venue was empty and silent. What exactly were you thinking? Marie's clear voice, laced with restrained anger, echoed through the quiet space. Brandon and Logan had arrived midway through the origami session because I'd called Logan myself. Clearly not expecting me to have Logan's contact information, Brandon, his face twisted in frustration, directed his irritation toward Marie. Why did you overrun the rental time by 30 minutes? It's really inconvenient, you know? At a joint seminar like this, extending the time without consulting anyone is just, well, you all are the event leads, so you'll be covering the extra costs, right? But overall, it wasn't a bad session, right? Any real issues? Brandon, what are you talking about? Logan looked baffled by Brandon's nonsensical response. Do you realize that the chaos today was entirely your doing? Or rather, that you intentionally showed up late to sabotage the event? Do you even have any pride in your work? Marie raised her voice, openly revealing her anger. Was I really late? Who here can prove that? Don't accuse me baselessly, all right? Logan, you saw me here from the start, right? He placed a heavy hand on Logan's shoulder, clearly trying to intimidate him. Logan probably felt he couldn't stand up to Brandon. Seeing Brandon's immature and bullying behavior, my sense of disgust only deepened. Can you still say that after we review the footage from the company car? Marie's face shifted from anger to an eerily calm expression. Brandon looked confused, so I added, "The company car you used today belongs to us. All our company vehicles are equipped with dashcams." Since Brandon was responsible for bringing the equipment, he'd been provided with one of our company's cars. Realizing the implications, Brandon's face went pale. The GPS data, timestamps, and in-car audio and video could easily confirm his lateness, and it would all be reported to his company. "I'll be reporting this incident to your company, including the repeated, unnecessary contacts you've made to me personally. Don't ever contact me again." With an expression as cold as ice, Marie left Brandon speechless. Now ghostly pale, it was clear he wouldn't be working with us again. Cheers! Cheers! With the turbulent yet successful seminar behind us, Marie and I decided to celebrate over drinks. Now that I thought about it, this was our first time going out for a drink together. Even though it was September, the air was still thick with humidity, making the night feel warmer than the temperature suggested. The crisp, cold beer helped clear away the muggy feeling. "Why didn't you report Brandon's messages to the company sooner, Marie?" "I wanted to wait until this seminar was over. I was hoping to handle it more diplomatically, but today, I just hit my limit. I'm planning to make sure he never works with us again." She spoke casually as she snacked on some pickles, seemingly unfazed, likely accustomed to receiving unwanted attention. At a glance, she's a striking, beautiful woman. It's no surprise that plenty of men would try to pursue her. Well, I'm glad nothing serious happened. But if anyone ever bothers you like that again, don't hesitate to report it. It's too late once something happens. Marie chuckled. "You're surprisingly protective, Alex. Like a dad or maybe more like a big brother?" Her laughter made me feel a bit self-conscious, like I'd been overdramatic. I had a younger sister. Maybe that's why I get worried around women about her age. "Oh, you had a sister. I think you mentioned that the first time we met? Was that for real?" She remembered our first meeting, and her question brought me back to that day, making me feel a little sheepish. It probably sounded strange, and I'm sorry if it did. But yeah, it was true. I had a younger sister who was the same age as you. 2 years younger than me. You had, what about now? She passed away. I'm so sorry. Marie murmured, a quiet apology, almost instinctive. Anyway, your idea for the impromptu origami lesson was brilliant. It really added a unique touch to the event. And I think it'd be great to incorporate it into future seminars, especially for international audiences. If we could get some occupational therapists or specialists involved, it could become a really engaging activity. I shifted the conversation, trying to lighten the mood. Speaking aloud about Lily being gone had left me feeling slightly shaken. That idea just came to me when I saw my origami charm, Marie said. It really felt like it came to my rescue. She took the charm out of her pocket and looked at it, smiling faintly with a touch of sadness. Remember how I mentioned that someone once told me it's a shame to judge people based on just one part of them? That person. That girl was the one who made this for me. It seems that Marie had a serious illness when she was a child, leading to a long period of hospitalization. After countless surgeries and an extended hospital stay, she now only has to go for regular checkups and can live a fairly normal life. During that hospital stay, she met the girl who gave her the origami charm. While Marie's condition improved, her friend's prognosis remained bleak, with no real hope for a cure. Even after Marie was discharged and started attending middle school, she continued visiting the girl in the hospital regularly. She lost her parents in an accident and was separated from her brother, so she always had this hint of sadness, but whenever I visited, she'd light up, laughing and chatting. She was incredibly sweet and got along with everyone in the ward. They said she might not make it to 20. But she held on, and just before she turned 20, she told me she was finally going to be able to live with her brother overseas. But Marie's voice faltered, her eyes misting with emotion. Lily. My quiet murmur made her look up at me in shock. Lily was my one and only sister. No, you're Lily's brother? We both stared at each other, too stunned to speak. How could it be that the friend in front of me was the one Lily had grown so close to? It felt like fate, but in the most surreal way. I didn't know, Marie said, bowing her head suddenly. I had no idea you were her brother when we first met, and I was rude to you. I didn't even thank you for helping me that day. Thank you. I hurried to reassure her, telling her it was fine and urging her to lift her head. As I looked at her, a thought resurfaced. During her long stay in the hospital, Lily had become quite skilled at origami. I remembered that now. Just wondering, but on the day we met, were you coming from the hospital? Ah, yes, actually. It was a regular checkup day, so I'd just been to the hospital. The faint smell of antiseptic I'd noticed that day hadn't been my imagination. I couldn't remember Lily's voice. Without photos, I probably wouldn't even have a clear image of her face anymore. But that hospital scent, for some reason, had embedded itself in my mind. It had become my memory of her. Lost in these thoughts, I could only mumble to myself, I see, and Marie spoke up. Lily was always saying how proud she was of you, Alex, Marie said gently. She told me that no matter where you were, you'd come back once a year with all kinds of souvenirs and stories. She'd even try to be temporarily discharged from the hospital just to be there when you arrived. I'm really not a brother to be proud of. After our parents died, I could hardly be there for her. Listening to her words only highlighted my regrets as her older brother, the things I hadn't done, the times I hadn't been there. That's not true at all. Lily herself told me. However you may feel, she saw you as her amazing, beloved big brother. She was always talking about how cool you were. Honestly, I thought she was a bit of a brother fanatic. I was a little surprised to see her face as her tone grew passionate. Our eyes met, and she added with a soft smile as if on the verge of tears, but she was right. You really are a wonderful person, Alex. For a moment, I wondered what expression I wore. Her eyes glistened, contrasting with my own dry gaze. The next week, I went about my work as usual. With the seminar over, my assignments with Marie also wrapped up, and we didn't have much reason to interact. On Friday night, I got a message from Marie, with whom I hardly had any conversations this week. Would you like to visit the cemetery with me this weekend? I'd been thinking about this all week. I hadn't truly let Lily go. Maybe it was time to find some closure. Agreeing to her invitation, I left my house on Saturday morning. An hour and a half by train from the city, the area wasn't fully rural but not quite urban either. It's been a long time since I'd been back to my old hometown. Lily rests beside my parents in the family cemetery. It was another 30-minute taxi ride from the station to the cemetery, a large, well-kept green space with clean, organized plots. Every time I'd returned to Japan, I'd visited my parents' grave, but it had been 7 years since my last visit here. I realized what an ungrateful son I'd been. I arrived in front of the grave. For some reason, my feet refused to move any further. The thought that Lily is here. The moment I acknowledged that, my vision wavered. At that moment, a gentle hand rested on my back, soothingly rubbing as if to comfort me. It was Marie. We hadn't exchanged many words on the way here, but I was grateful for the quiet. Taking a deep breath, I finally took the steps to stand directly before the grave. I placed the flowers and put my hands together in prayer. Dad, Mom, I'm home. I greeted my parents. But I couldn't bring myself to speak to Lily. Looking again at the headstone, I saw, along with my parents' names, another name engraved. The stark reality hit me: Lily is truly here. Alex, Marie said softly, I've been holding on to something your grandmother gave me as a keepsake, but I think you should have it. I was just staring at the grave, and what she handed me was a phone. An old model that had belonged to Lily for many years. It was charged, so it could be activated. I saw the photos she had taken. Some included Marie, and Lily was smiling brightly with friends her own age, something I'd never seen before. I couldn't help but smile. It struck me then, I had no photos with Lily. I'd always avoided cameras, and now I regretted never capturing those moments together. In a folder titled Big Brother, there were old family photos of Lily and me, likely taken from family albums, along with scenic shots I'd sent her from abroad. Then Marie spoke hesitantly. I felt a bit guilty, but please check the unsent drafts. I opened the mail app, and there was a single draft saved in the outbox. I read in silence, the words sinking deep into me. Alex, when you called to say you'd be coming back to Japan, I was so happy. I told you I was excited, but I don't think we should live together. You'd do too much for me. I don't think I'll live much longer. I don't want you to be sad. I want you to live your life freely. It sounds cool, but it's my wish. My last selfish request, please cry for me when I'm gone. Cry and remember me. But after that, live happily, laugh, and keep going. I love you, my big brother. There was more text at the bottom. Alex, I want to see you. Tears began to fall freely, spilling onto the screen. The message had been written just a week before Lily's passing. I wonder what Lily was thinking, feeling, and looking like as she typed this message. How many times had she rewritten those words? Was she crying? Smiling? Hurting? Suffering? Uncontrollable sobs escaped my lips, words failing me entirely. Here I was, a grown man, kneeling and crying like a child. But I didn't care how it looked. Lily was gone. This was the first time I truly accepted it. Ignoring the dirt, Marie knelt beside me, gently wrapping her arm around my shoulder as I cried. You finally cried. It's one of the hardest things in the world, needing to cry but not being able to. Her gentle voice and the soft beat of her heart made me feel grounded. Ah! I'm alive. That sound helped calm my tears. Lily used to say that if you and I ever got married, we could all be a family forever. I know it was just a childhood dream, but somehow, I think Lily brought us together. So, once you've cried it all out, would you try living and laughing with me? Hearing her kind words, I placed my hand on hers, resting on my shoulder. Lily, I'm home. Just then, a gentle breeze brushed over our heads. The sadness of loss may never fully heal. But when we face that sadness, perhaps we find something precious in return. No one would ever stay at a dump like this. If anyone actually did, it'd have to be a thrill seeker or just as down and out as this place. Henry. Don't say things like that in front of the guests. A mocking laugh echoed through the hall of the Irving Inn, where I was staying. The man called Henry sneered, then shot a disdainful look at Rebecca, the innkeeper. Guests? Ha! There's nobody here, Rebecca. This is as good as it gets with your so-called skills. Face it, this is your reality. After spewing his insults, Henry left with a loud, satisfied laugh, clearly pleased with the frustration on Rebecca's face. Rebecca's hands trembled slightly as she stood there, her beloved inn viciously insulted. It's all over. Even though I'd only been here a few days, I could feel their pain. No, it's not over. Trust me, let me handle it. Then a few months later. For everyone involved with Irving Inn, including myself, our lives were about to change drastically. Because the truth is, my real identity is. My name is Samuel. I work as a concierge at a well-known hotel in the city. My guiding principle is to provide service with genuine warmth. The senior staff member who was responsible for training me at this hotel repeatedly taught me to offer hospitality from the customer's perspective. Following that training, I am now guiding my juniors in the same way. However, since Mr. Keller took over as the new manager a few years ago, there's been a growing emphasis on profit and efficiency. Many people left in opposition to his ways. Now, those who remain are mostly people who say yes to Mr. Keller's policies. In that environment, my opposition to Mr. Keller made me a complete outlier. Today, yet again, Mr. Keller and I clashed over his push for unreasonable measures in the name of profit. He'd clearly grown tired of my constant challenges over the years. Finally, he said, if you can't follow my way, you're welcome to leave any time. No matter what I said, the management approach wouldn't change. Not a single ally in the workplace. Above all, I couldn't stand Mr. Keller's disregard for both employees and guests, so I left the hotel. Staying there would only drive me further from the passion and values I hold dear. I felt no regret about my decision to leave. Still, walking away from a place filled with memories after so many years stirred some sentimentality. So, I decided to take a trip to clear my mind. Whenever I had time off, I'd visit various accommodations domestically and abroad for both learning and relaxation. More often than not, I opted for traditional Japanese inns that offered a refreshing change from the usual hotel environment. I remembered an inn I'd had my eye on for some time and checked its website. Surrounded by nature, enjoy a moment of tranquility at Irving Inn. The homepage featured serene images of the inn, renowned hot springs, dishes made with local ingredients, and the area's breathtaking natural beauty. Just looking at the photos lifted my spirits. The innkeeper and staff members all had warm, welcoming smiles in the photos. Irving Inn was known for its excellent hospitality, and I'd been keeping an eye on it since last year, hoping to visit and learn from them someday. Though I was no longer working, I eagerly went through the booking process, looking forward to my stay. A few days later, I arrived in the town where Irving Inn was located. Recently, the town had been developing as a tourist destination, with many people visiting, especially on weekends, bringing a lively energy to the area. Since the inn was nestled up in the mountains, the hustle and bustle gradually faded as I approached, replaced by the lush green of the trees and the sounds of birdsong and rustling leaves. Even this short journey was enough to bring a sense of escape, and I felt myself completely relaxing. Upon arrival, I saw a sturdy, well-built inn. It had a slightly worn look, but the architecture reflected a deep history, harmonizing beautifully with the surrounding nature. The thought of spending a few days here made me smile with anticipation. I walked lightly through the entrance and headed to the front desk. However, the staff member standing there didn't notice my arrival, her attention entirely on the paperwork she was intensely reading. A bit confused, I tried to get her attention. Oh. Yes. A guest. I'm so sorry. Welcome to Irving Inn. The young woman at the desk bowed hurriedly, clearly flustered. She seemed new, as her speech and movements were a bit unsteady. While she sorted out my check-in, handling paperwork, and checking the computer, I looked around. The other staff members rushing past the entrance appeared equally busy. Their movements were a bit awkward, and a few looked like they might trip at any moment. A senior staff member was offering guidance, helping them with their tasks. Yet no one seemed to notice me at the front desk, and they all hurried off. I thought this place was known for its hospitality, but this is a bit. I could feel their earnestness, which was endearing, but I wondered if I could truly relax in such a hectic atmosphere. As I was pondering this, a problem arose. What? The room I reserved is already occupied? I am terribly sorry. The young woman at the desk looked on the verge of tears, bowing repeatedly. It was a classic case of double booking. This is unexpected. I sincerely apologize. More than anger, I felt disappointment. I had been so looking forward to my stay. As the staff member kept apologizing, someone hurried towards us. I apologize sincerely for the inconvenience our oversight has caused. Recognizing her face from the website, I realized this was Rebecca, the innkeeper. The front desk staff must have alerted her as soon as the double booking was discovered. Despite hurrying over, Rebecca didn't appear the least bit flustered. Her neatly styled black hair had a beautiful luster, and she wore a refined lavender kimono that suited her perfectly. Her manner was gentle, with graceful gestures and refined language that made a strong impression. Is there any other room available? I was really looking forward to staying here, so I'd love to if possible. At my request, she quickly moved to the front desk, checking the reservation status. I'm terribly sorry. All our rooms are booked for today, so we're unable to offer another room at this time. With that, Rebecca once again bowed deeply. The female employee standing next to her also follows Rebecca's lead, bowing along with her. Ah, I see. That's disappointing. Oh, sorry. Rebecca's response deepens my disappointment, and I can't help but let my true feelings slip out. Seeing the obvious dejection on my face, Rebecca hesitantly speaks up to me. Considering it's a holiday, I expect nearby accommodations are likely fully booked as well. So, if you'd be willing, my home is just next to the inn. As an apology, we'd like to offer our unused guesthouse to you at no charge, along with full meals and service. I was taken aback by the unexpected offer. I was hesitant about staying in a private residence, even if it was a guesthouse, and tried to refuse. But Rebecca insisted, saying, I can't bear to let a guest who was looking forward to staying here leave disappointed. The young woman at the desk also bowed multiple times. And I couldn't refuse. Wow! This room is amazing. I'm glad you like it. Since Rebecca had other guests to attend to, her daughter, Heather, showed me to the room. It was beautifully maintained, with a classic interior as lovely as the inn's rooms. Since it was right next to the inn, the view from the window was likely just as stunning as it would have been from an actual guest room. Since the guest house was a bit removed from both the main house and the inn, I didn't have to worry about noise or overhearing conversations. Heather, who had shown me to my room, explained the meal schedule, the hot springs' hours, and other details. In her service, I could see traces of her mother, Rebecca. She answered my questions smoothly, with a warm smile and thoughtful gestures that put me at ease. Even as a fellow hospitality professional, I found Heather's service remarkable, with many things worth emulating. Which made me wonder. Both Rebecca and her daughter Heather possessed such high-level service skills, so why did the other staff, especially the woman at the front desk, seem so inexperienced? Was it simply a lack of training, or were they all new hires? Either way, the disparity in staff skill levels is so wide that it risks leading to disappointing reviews for the inn. My honest impression was that it's a shame, given how many good qualities the place has. Lost in thought, I realized Heather had finished her explanation. Once again, I apologize for today's inconvenience. I hope you'll enjoy your stay here. And please let us know if there's anything we can do to make it even better. Her radiant smile, full of warmth, left me momentarily speechless. Are you all right? Heather looked up at me with a concerned expression. She seemed about my age, with a youthful face and large, sparkling eyes that shone in the sunlight. Her gaze made my face grow warm. Oh, no, I'm fine. Actually, I'm really looking forward to both the hot springs and the food. Thank you. As you can see, our inn is surrounded by mountains, so our menu is mainly focused on local delicacies like wild vegetables, mushrooms, and river fish caught nearby. Our chef's dishes are all delicious, so please enjoy as much as you can. Oh, and of course, our hot springs is one of our prides too. The salt in the water is great for your skin and helps relieve fatigue. So please take your time relaxing in it. And, perhaps due to her enthusiasm, her words lost some of their earlier formality and became a bit more casual. Normally, using such language with a customer would be a no-go, but from Heather's attitude, I could sense her dedication to learning about the inn. And above all, her genuine affection for it. Not only was Heather unstoppable in her talking, but I also found myself smiling naturally as I listened. Oh, I'm so sorry. I got so caught up in talking that I completely left you behind. Once I start talking about the inn, I just can't stop. Even though my mom scolds me about it all the time. Heather looked down, her face turning red with embarrassment. No, not at all. Hearing all that has made me even more excited about my stay. And I can tell how much you love this inn, so it really warms my heart. Do you plan to take over the inn in the future? She relaxed, her face softening at my words. Yes. I love this inn, it's a place very close to my heart. Right now, it's just my mom and me, but my grandparents and father used to work here too. I grew up watching my family and the staff work so hard. It's tough, of course, and as a kid, I sometimes felt lonely. But I'll never forget the look of happiness on their faces when they saw a guest smile. So, I want to follow in my mom's footsteps and become a proper innkeeper who works with our staff to create a place where guests leave with genuine gratitude. That said, I still make lots of mistakes and get scolded by my mom and the senior staff all the time. Heather's bright expression revealed her strong determination to inherit the inn. Watching her, I found myself speaking without thinking. You'll make a great innkeeper, Heather. Ha! Oh, I was just as surprised by my own words as Heather was, judging by her astonished expression. After exchanging glances, we both burst into laughter. Thank you. I'll do my best to make sure you're satisfied with your stay. With a final smile and a slight bow, Heather left the room, saying, Please don't hesitate to call if you need anything. Heather was in charge of most of my needs during my stay at the guest house. Each time she stopped by, she'd check if I needed anything, and casual conversations would often lead to the two of us laughing. after which she'd hurry back to her duties. Just as Heather had said, I thoroughly enjoyed the excellent food and relaxing hot springs. Now, I stretch out on the prepared bed, lying down with my arms and legs spread wide. Ah, this is perfect. I'm full, the hot springs was great, and, enveloped in the warmth of the sun-scented duvet, I closed my eyes. What came to mind was Heather's smile. There was a warmth in her smile, as if she genuinely wanted to make guests feel welcome. Her presence was like spring sunshine, warming the heart. But thinking of that warmth made my heart race, and I felt a blush creeping up my cheeks. Heather, she's really something special. Relieved to be alone, I let the words escape my lips. Her smile flashed through my mind, again and again. I wondered if I'd dream of her tonight. Feeling a bit embarrassed by my own thoughts, I pulled the duvet over my head, trying to hide from them. Before I knew it, I drifted off to sleep, still wrapped in my thoughts of her. The next morning, I got dressed and enjoyed the breakfast delivered to my room. I plan to go sightseeing today, so I head over to the inn staff to ask for recommendations on nearby attractions and must-visit spots. As I arrived at the front desk, I heard loud voices echoing through the quiet morning. What's going on here? My sincerest apologies. The raised voices didn't fit the usual calm of the inn. It sounded like a complaint. Several staff members, including Rebecca and Heather, were bowing deeply before a guest angrily shouting his grievances. I've never stayed somewhere so unpleasant. I'm leaving now. The irate guest stormed past me, each step heavy with frustration. I considered saying something, but before I could decide, Rebecca noticed me watching and came over. I'm so sorry for the disturbance. Is there anything you need? Her tone was as polite and gentle as always, but I could see traces of fatigue on her face. I know it's not my place as a guest, but what happened? I hesitantly asked. Rebecca hesitated for a moment before offering a troubled smile. We received a complaint from that guest just now, but apparently, the guest had claimed I was placed in a subpar room, different from the one I reserved, and the staff had been unhelpful and rude. However, after double-checking, Rebecca found no mistake with the reservation. And none of the staff members who attended to him had behaved improperly. Strange incidents like this have been increasing over the past 6 months. Complaints about things like expired snacks in the room or the private bath being too cold and causing a cold, even though none of them were true. Guests have even walked out or canceled reservations at the last minute. Just recently, someone left a complaint on a booking site about the food we don't even serve. Since then, our reservations have dropped significantly. Heather spoke up, and several other employees chimed in with their own accounts of suspicious occurrences. While such incidents occasionally happen in this business, the frequency of these odd complaints in the past half year was unusual. Could it be someone's harassing Irving in? One of the staff whispered, and everyone fell silent. Glancing at Rebecca, I saw a shadowed expression on her face. I was about to say something when the door swung open with a bang. Everyone turned in unison. Oh my, what a gloomy atmosphere. It's like a funeral in here. The blatantly rude tone made me bristle, but Rebecca immediately stepped forward, facing the newcomer. Henry. What brings you here? From where I stood, I couldn't see Rebecca's face, but her tone was noticeably stiff. Rebecca, another guest left again? How many times does that make it now? I've told you time and time again, you're not up to the task. I've heard all about it. The staff here are incompetent, and the service is abysmal. You're the one who's dragged this inn's once praised reputation for excellent service through the mud. Henry, as he was called, spoke with a smug look on his face. Rebecca listened quietly at first but quickly countered with a firm tone. Henry, I won't tolerate insults towards our dedicated staff. They work hard for this inn and our guests. You, as an outsider, have no place to speak on this matter. Henry sneered and continued. Working hard isn't enough. Most of your staff are amateurs. You're understaffed and lack any proper training. Who'd want to stay in a place like this? Training shortcomings are my responsibility. But even with a staffing agency, we can't seem to get new hires. Which I suspect is because of the strings you've been pulling. Oh, Rebecca, don't make accusations without proof. It's because this low standard and can't manage proper training that no one wants to work or stay here. You'd be better off shutting it down now and selling the land while it's worth something. Look around, everyone else has sided with me. Only a few places remain in this area, yours included. Wouldn't want you and your daughter left out on the street now, would we? Ha ha. Hearing Henry's words, Heather let out a faint sound. Her face had gone pale. She must have only just realized it now. The fact that this inn was being targeted by Henry. Rebecca, standing face to face with Henry, maintained her resolute stance, but I could see her clenched fists trembling slightly. Oh, the young lady wasn't aware? Rebecca's stubbornness is quite the bother. If she doesn't hand over this place soon, it'll delay my plans. But if you continue to be difficult, I might just resort to harsher methods. I have plenty of connections, you know. Watching him leer at Rebecca, I felt something snap inside me. His arrogant attitude, pushing his own agenda without any regard for others, reminded me of my former manager, Mr. Keller. Even though it had only been a day for me, I couldn't stand that Henry was trying to ruin Irving Inn and cause pain to Rebecca and Heather. Is that a threat? Should I go ahead and report your words to the police? Ha! And just who do you think you are? I jumped in suddenly, and it startled Henry. Samuel. Both Rebecca and Heather said my name in unison. I'm a guest staying here. I just happened to be around, but as I said, I could call the police right now and report your threats if that's what you'd prefer. I held my phone in my right hand and stepped toward Henry and Rebecca. Ugh, another guest still here. All right, fine. But make sure to have all the documents ready next time. Throwing out his parting words, Henry wiped sweat from his brow and hurriedly left with heavy, frantic steps. Once the door shut, the now silent entryway was filled with Heather's voice. Samuel. Thank you so much. She took my hand as she spoke. Heather. Really, I didn't do much. My words stumbled out, a mix of modesty and fluster at her holding my hand. At that moment, Rebecca approached us. Samuel, thank you. You really helped us. Rebecca lifted her face and began to tell us the story. According to her, Henry had been pressuring her to give up this land for about a year. It seemed that, as various business proposals aimed to boost tourism around the area, Henry's company joined in, pushing for a large-scale plan to turn this whole area into a resort. With support from some influential backers, Henry grew bolder, targeting nearby inns and shops, including the Irving Inn, with relentless buyouts, using strong-arm tactics whenever necessary to acquire land. Unable to resist Henry's power, most nearby businesses had either closed or relocated, leaving only a handful, including the Irving Inn, still standing. Over the past 6 months, Henry's threats had become more intense. He seemed to have hired people to file fake complaints and orchestrate cancellations, shaking the inn's reputation in an attempt to force them out. "Mom, why didn't you tell us about this? Did you think we weren't dependable enough?" Hearing the truth from Rebecca, Heather's eyes welled up with tears. Rebecca, too, looked pained as she held Heather's hand tightly. "Heather, everyone, I'm so sorry. I just didn't want you to worry. I thought if I handled Henry myself, you could focus on taking care of our guests. But in the end, I only made you worry more. I'm sorry. I'm such an unworthy innkeeper. I'm so sorry." Her face was lowered, but the last words were spoken in a trembling voice. Heather and the other employees in the room were all disheartened, some softly crying. "Maybe it's time to let go. At this rate, I'm just going to keep dragging everyone down." Rebecca whispered these words quietly. "If this goes on, the Irving Inn will disappear." The inn Heather had hoped to carry on. Her dream would be lost. "Hold on, please." Before I knew it, I had raised my voice. Everyone turned to look at me. It's a situation where the place they work might disappear in the near future. Everyone wore an expression of overwhelming anxiety. As I glanced at them, my gaze met Heather's, her cheeks wet with tears. "Samuel." I nod reassuringly toward her as tears gather in her large eyes. Then, I turned back to face Rebecca. "Rebecca, I'm currently unemployed, but I used to work in a hotel. While inns might be a bit different, I have experience and knowledge in hospitality. If you'd allow it, I'd like to help with staff training." Rebecca and Heather exchanged glances. "You know I was really looking forward to staying here, right?" "That's true, but there was another reason. I'd heard great things about the service here, and I really wanted to learn from it myself." I was thrilled to arrive. Though I was surprised by the double booking and all, but I was genuinely impressed by your hospitality, yours and Heather's, and the dedication of all the staff. Despite fewer guests, you all still prioritize warmth and care. I knew this was a place I wanted to enjoy during my stay. And now, I really don't want to see this inn disappear. I kept my true reason, not wanting Heather's dream to be crushed, to myself, but my desire to save the inn was genuine. Hoping my feelings would reach her, I looked directly at Rebecca. Then, other staff members began to speak up. "I don't want this place to close either. I'll keep working hard, so please, Rebecca, don't give up." Hearing these voices, Heather took Rebecca's hand. "Mom, let's protect our home, okay? I'll work harder than ever. Let's all work together. We can't let someone like him win." The other employees joined in with words of encouragement, saying, "We'll do our best." Moved by their words, tears fell from Rebecca's eyes. "Thank you, Heather. Thank you, everyone." Rebecca closed her eyes for a moment, then looked straight at me. Her eyes were no longer filled with tears, but rather a determined, resolute strength. "Samuel, I apologize for burdening you as our guest, but for the sake of everyone here fighting to save the Irving Inn, could we ask for your help?" "Samuel, please." Rebecca and Heather both bowed simultaneously. The other staff members followed suit, bowing as well. "I may not be able to do much, but I'm one of those who want to protect the Irving Inn too. Please, let's work together." I bowed deeply as well, grateful to be part of this. From that moment, I became one of the allies supporting Irving Inn. With Henry's tactics likely to escalate at any time, we had to raise the inn's revenue to last year's level as quickly as possible. I signed a short-term contract to oversee employee training at the inn. Though hotels and inns have their differences, at the core, The spirit of hospitality and the question of what can we do for our guests remains the same. I focused on these principles during training, helped cover tasks where they were short-staffed, and gathered guest feedback to pass on to Rebecca. Of course, with the new level of expectations, some found it too challenging and left. Among those who left, some engaged in suspicious behavior, like deliberately being rude to customers or attempting to enter restricted areas. It makes me wonder if Henry had somehow been involved. This also suggests that the false complaints, reputation-damaging reviews, and sudden cancellations we've experienced might be part of Henry's influence as well. When I mentioned this to Rebecca, she replied, "It wouldn't surprise me." The dirty tactics he'd been using, there was no way we could lose to someone like him. For Rebecca, Heather, the staff, and everyone who loved this inn as much as I did, we had to reclaim its true reputation. We worked tirelessly together. Aside from training, I reached out to contacts from my previous job, gathering support and promoting the inn through travel bloggers and magazine writers I knew. The dedication to genuine, heartfelt service that I'd once been discouraged from practicing was now finally allowed to shine at Irving Inn. Seeing the guests' smiles and the joyful faces of the train staff filled my heart like nothing else had before. It was no exaggeration to say that these days were some of the most fulfilling I'd ever experienced. As 1 month, then 2 months passed, and as the tourist season approached, the reputation of Irving Inn not only returned but soared even higher. Guest feedback poured in, saying, "We were so comforted by your hospitality, and it was the best inn experience. We'll be back." The inn's stellar reputation from before was quick to rebound, faster than I'd anticipated, once we improved staff training and filled our ranks. Sales also steadily recovered, and within just a few months, we achieved the same revenue as last year. On that landmark day, even the usually composed Rebecca was celebrating, embracing Heather and the team in joy. "It's all thanks to you, Samuel. You gave us the strength to keep going. Thank you so much." Heather's tearful gratitude warmed my heart. I was truly glad to have been able to help her. "Being able to work here with all of you has made me so happy, thank you." Struggling to hold back tears, I expressed my gratitude as well. Being able to pursue my ideal of heartfelt service here had truly become an irreplaceable experience in my life. I was endlessly grateful to everyone at Irving Inn for giving me this opportunity. But this wasn't the end. The harassment hadn't stopped entirely yet. Henry was likely still plotting to take over Irving Inn. We couldn't let our guard down. With guests pouring back in, the inn was lively and bustling once again. That afternoon, the gathering that had reserved the banquet hall came to an end. With something I needed to confirm with Rebecca, I headed over to the banquet hall where she was attending to guests. Then it happened. "Hey! Where's Rebecca?" A man, accompanied by a group of large men in black suits, shouted loudly at the front desk staff. Thinking it might be trouble, I quickly rushed to the front desk. "Oh, Samuel. This man here." The staff at the front desk, noticing me approaching, gave me a troubled look, silently pleading for my help. "Is there something I can help you with, sir?" As I spoke up, the man turned to face me. I recognized that face. "Henry. Ha! Who the hell are you?" It seemed he didn't recognize me. There he stood, Henry, with his greasy, smug face. "Well, never mind. Hey you, go fetch Rebecca. If you tell her I'm here, she'll come running." He gives orders with a condescendingly polite attitude. That demeanor remained as thoroughly unpleasant as ever. Rebecca is currently attending to guests and cannot step away. If you have any business, I'd be happy to hear it in her stead. There were other guests present in the lobby. No matter how unpleasant this got, I maintained a polite demeanor. "What did you say?" "There's no guest here more important than me." "Get her here right now." Henry, clearly displeased with my response, began shouting angrily. Other guests nearby started to stir, wondering what was going on. "Sir, please keep your voice down, it's disturbing the other guests." "Shut up. Are you trying to give me orders? Just because a few more customers came back, you think you're something special? If I really wanted to, I could crush this in no time." Henry laughed as he said this, and the men behind him stepped forward toward me. Like Henry, they wore smirks on their faces, cracking their knuckles as they approached. Were they really planning on causing a scene here, in public? This seemed foolish beyond belief. I couldn't help but sigh. "You?" Just as Henry's anger peaked, a firm voice called out, "What's going on here?" Rebecca approached us. Seeing her, Henry's face twisted into a sly grin as he turned to confront her. "So you finally showed up. Ignoring all my calls lately, huh? I had to come down here myself. Now hand over those property deeds." Since his last visit, Rebecca had ignored Henry's calls and managed to thwart his harassment attempts. It seemed his patience had finally run out. To show up on this day of all days, perhaps Henry's luck had run dry. Rebecca responded, unfazed, with a resolute tone. "Henry, as I've told you many times before, we have no intention of giving this land, which our family has protected for generations, to someone like you. And as my employee already mentioned, creating a scene here disturbs our guests. Kindly leave and do not come back. You, acting all high and mighty just because I've been playing nice. Consider yourself warned. I'll use force if I have to." With that, Henry's men stepped forward. Despite being faced with men far larger than herself, Rebecca held her ground, her gaze steady and unflinching. In that tense atmosphere, a calm, almost gentle voice suddenly broke through. Well, what a ruckus this is." All eyes turned toward the voice. Henry was the first to react. "Mr. Sanders." An elderly man with a distinguished face and a well-kept beard stood beside Rebecca. Though his tone was mild, his presence was commanding. Mr. Sanders was a powerful figure in the community. The chairman of a major construction firm responsible for most of the area's infrastructure projects. Even Henry, with his ambitions in resort development, clearly knew who he was. "Ah, Henry, was it? I hear you're looking to enter the local tourism business. My associates have mentioned as much." Taking this as encouragement, Henry launched into a lengthy, self-praising explanation of his development plans. Once he finished, Mr. Sanders stroked his beard thoughtfully before responding. "But you see, I've been a fan of the Irving Inn for many years, since the days of Rebecca's grandfather. I can't support a plan that would destroy such a fine establishment." "Isn't that right, gentlemen?" At his words, several others stepped forward. Seeing them, Henry's face turned pale. These were prominent figures from the local community. Today, coincidentally, the banquet hall was hosting a gathering of many influential people from the town. With Irving Inn's improved reputation, they had requested to rent out the banquet hall for their event. "Henry, we heard every word you shouted earlier. Rumors have reached us, but it's something else to witness such underhanded tactics firsthand. Don't you think?" Though Mr. Sanders had retired from active work over a decade ago, his former strength as a leader who once commanded a group of resilient men could still be felt in his every word and presence. Caught by Mr. Sanders' piercing gaze, Henry began to tremble uncontrollably. Seeing this, Mr. Sanders chuckled softly, then turned his gaze toward Rebecca. Rebecca met his gaze, nodded, and stepped forward to confront Henry. Henry, I've already discussed everything you've done here with these gentlemen. And not just on our behalf. Others in the area have also suffered your company's harassment. Even knowing this, do you still insist on taking our land? In response to Rebecca's words, the assembled local leaders nodded, each staring at Henry with unyielding eyes. Unable to withstand the pressure, Henry let out a pathetic squeal, eek, and fled outside. A few days later, with help from Mr. Sanders and other allies, Henry's various misdeeds came to light. Just as we had suspected, all the harassment, complaints, and sudden cancellations that targeted Irving Inn and nearby businesses had been orchestrated by people hired by Henry. What's more, he had collaborated with certain members of the local tourism association and staffing agencies, using dirty tactics to apply pressure on anyone who didn't support his plans. Several former employees who had acted suspiciously at the inn were also planted by Henry, deliberately causing issues to damage our reputation. All of them ended up dealing with the police, and Henry's grand tourism plan was officially terminated. Some of the businesses that had been forced to close or relocate because of Henry were able to return. Though the scandal attracted media attention and stirred up the town, things eventually settled down, and a new, thoughtfully revised tourism development plan began to take shape. Fortunately, with the Irving Inn having regained its former popularity, we were chosen to lead this new initiative, and the team's morale soared. As for me, Samuel, the guests in the Sakura room are asking for you. Understood. I'll be there right away. I had initially planned to leave after Henry's issue was resolved, but everyone at the inn had convinced me to stay. So I continued working here at Irving Inn. Heather, too, had begun her full training as a future innkeeper, now standing proudly alongside Rebecca as the face of the inn. And as for us, with Rebecca's blessing, Heather and I began a relationship with marriage in mind. Now, I often find myself being teased as the young master, but getting to see the smile that first captivated me up close fills me with happiness. Samuel, keep up the great work. Heather, or rather, the young innkeeper. The day I left my former job, thinking of Irving Inn was purely by chance. Thanks to that, I found not only the perfect place to work but also a beloved fiancé. Living true to one's principles is never easy. But knowing that I was able to help someone made all those challenging days worth it. From now on, I'll continue to uphold my belief in heartfelt service and support her by her side. If you get this right, I'll make you the president. And if you don't want that, I'll do whatever you ask. How about it? No complaints now, right? At our middle school reunion, a beautiful CEO's daughter, whom I hadn't seen in years, challenged me with a tough question. She seemed to dislike me since back then, and now she sneered, mocking me for only having a high school diploma. Her face bore a smug expression, as if she were saying, "I bet you can't solve this." Honestly, I didn't want either prize, but I couldn't turn down a fight when one was handed to me. As I looked over the question, well, I had a bit of trouble with this one myself. It shouldn't be so easy for you either, right? Fine. I'll give you a little hint. Oh, sorry. It was so easy I already solved it. Ha! Actually, you know. I shot a smirk at the stunned CEO's daughter. My name is Rick Mitchell, 32 years old. My work involves the ocean. But I'm not out on the sea like a fisherman. In the mild climate of the Seto Inland Sea, I run a fish farming business, raising red sea bream and flounder. This fish farm was started by my grandfather. When I graduated high school, I took over the business. My family includes my dad, my mom, and my sister, who's 8 years older, making us a family of 4. Dad works as a banker at a regional bank, and mom is a homemaker. With a strict dad, a gentle mom, and a caring sister, I had a pretty happy life. Since I was young, I loved going to my grandparents' house. Every summer break, I'd stay there for a long time, surrounded by the ocean and mountains. Hey, Rick. Let's go to the ocean. Wait up, Grandpa. Each morning, I'd head to the sea with my grandpa and help feed the red sea bream and flounder on the farm. It was just feeding them, but with such a large farm, it felt like hard work for a kid. Still, every day I'd help without skipping. And the breakfast afterward always tasted incredible. In the afternoons, I'd swim in the sea or catch bugs with friends who lived nearby, enjoying my childhood to the fullest. I remember feeling so happy because the local kids always welcomed me, even though I only came during summer. But when I was about to graduate high school, Grandpa fell ill. The problem was how to keep the fish farm running. My dad, with his banking job, couldn't take over the business. Then I'll take over Grandpa's fish farm. Are you sure, Rick? You were planning to go to college. I'm sure. I'd hate to see Grandpa's fish farm go away. Dad tried to talk me out of it, but I couldn't bear the thought of letting my grandfather's fish farm go under. With that strong conviction, I convinced him. So, I gave up on going to college, moved in with my grandparents, and started helping out at the farm. Though I knew the work was tough, I had watched for years and had a general idea of the steps. A veteran named Sam, who had worked with Grandpa for years, taught me the detailed work and helped me get through. Sam had known me since I was little and had always treated me like a grandson when I'd come to help at the farm. He was both kind and strict as he taught me. After a while, Grandpa's health improved enough that he could start working with us again. Rick, I'm sorry. You've done so much for us. Don't worry about it. I did it because I wanted to. Rick's pretty efficient, so it's been a big help. You should take it easy, old man. Hey now, I'm not ready to lose to the young ones just yet. At Grandpa's words, Sam and I looked at each other and laughed. Then, one day, I got a call from Mom. Apparently, an invitation postcard for my middle school reunion had arrived at my parents' house. When I graduated from middle school, we moved due to Dad's job transfer, leaving behind the neighborhood I'd known. So, I hadn't kept in touch with any of my classmates since then. I wonder how everyone's doing. I'm kind of curious, but I just don't feel like going to the reunion. As I was thinking that, Mom unusually encouraged me to attend. Usually, when I say I'm not going, you just say him without much interest. When I asked her why, she explained what the postcard had said. Apparently, this reunion was a big deal because our 9th grade teacher, Mr. Thompson, was retiring. And the gathering would double as his retirement celebration. Hey, Rick, maybe you should go this time? You always skip these things. Yeah. Mr. Thompson did a lot for me. I thought it over. I'd gotten invitations before but never went to any of the reunions. It was because there was one woman I really didn't want to see. It wasn't like we dated or broken up or anything. But for some reason, she had always disliked me in middle school, almost like she saw me as an enemy. What puzzled me was that I had no idea why she'd felt that way. If I'd actually done something to her, I'd apologize. But since I didn't remember doing anything, there wasn't even a clear reason to make amends. What's with that bedhead? So uncool. No wonder you can't get any attention looking like that. What's that handwriting? It's so messy I can't even read it. Really shows who you are as a person. Try writing neater, will you? She would make comments like that, always putting me down. Over time, her presence became something I resented, and my grades even started to slip, worrying my family and teachers back then. I wanted to ask her why she acted that way toward me, but I never got the chance before we moved right after graduation. I still wanted to know the reason, but facing her now would probably just mean hearing more of her jabs, which didn't exactly excite me. As I was mulling this over on the phone with Mom. Hey, Rick. Are you even listening? Oh. Sorry, just got lost in thought. Good grief. So, what's it going to be? Should I mark you down as attending? Yeah, go ahead. I do want to see Mr. Thompson, after all. After some hesitation, I decided I really should go this time to thank Mr. Thompson for everything he'd done. I double-checked the date with Mom and made up my mind to attend. Then, I shared the news with Grandpa and Sam. Oh, a reunion, huh? That's great. Maybe you'll finally meet someone special. Rick could find himself a lovely bride, no doubt. Guys, reunions aren't for that. I laughed off their teasing and headed back to my parents' house. After dropping off my bags at the old place and chatting with Mom a bit, I headed to the hotel where the reunion was being held. At the entrance, I checked in and pinned on the name tag provided. Entering the banquet hall, I noticed it was a standing buffet setup. Looks like a lot of people came since it's also a celebration for Mr. Thompson. I glanced around the room. Even though it had been since middle school, some people hadn't changed much at all. Hey! Are you Rick? No way. And look at you, totally tanned. Well, I run a fish farm by the ocean. Of course, I'm tanned. You vanished right after graduation. We were pretty worried, you know? Yeah. None of the high schools around here had you. Haha, my bad. Talking with everyone brought a flood of memories back. After a while, the reunion officially began. After the organizers' opening remarks, a toast was proposed, and everyone raised their glasses in a celebratory cheer. Then came time for chatting and enjoying the meal. I decided to greet Mr. Thompson first, grabbing a bottle of beer and making my way over to him. Mr. Thompson, thank you for all your hard work over the years. Oh, Rick. How have you been? Thanks to you, I've been doing well. With that, I poured some beer into his glass. Mr. Thompson specialized in social studies. He was usually a strict teacher, but he was also incredibly caring. Thanks to you, I've been able to get along with my family, even now. I really appreciate what you did for me back then. Good to hear. I heard you moved right after graduation, so I was a bit worried about you. Mr. Thompson smiled, eyes crinkling warmly. Mr. Thompson, Just as I was about to continue our conversation, more classmates began gathering around Mr. Thompson. I wanted to talk with him more, but with people crowding in one after another, there was no chance for a relaxed conversation. Oh well, I'll talk to him later, I thought, and returned to the group of classmates to reminisce about old memories and chat about what everyone was up to. Some had found success, while others were still facing challenges. But we all agreed it was wonderful to reunite like this. As the reunion reached its midpoint, a bingo game began. Just as the energy picked up, a stunning woman with flowing hair entered the room a bit late. People started murmuring, "Who is that?" She's gorgeous." The whole room began buzzing, but I recognized her immediately. Her name was Emma Harris. She'd been beautiful even in middle school, but seeing her now, more stunning than I could have expected, took me by surprise. The others soon realized she was Emma, too, and whispers spread as they noticed her. Listening in, I gathered that after high school, she'd gone to Tokyo University and even won the Miss Tokyo University title thanks to her looks. She was also the daughter of the president of Harris Foods and was now on the board there. But while everyone else admired her, I felt my body tense up. She was, after all, the reason I'd avoided previous reunions. Emma and I had shared the same class in 7th and 9th grades, but I'd always found her hard to be around. Or rather, I'd go so far as to say I outright disliked her. Every time we made eye contact, she would glare and quickly make some snide comment. And since I didn't understand why she treated me like that, it was baffling. How could I possibly like someone who openly disliked me? In academics, too, we'd always vied for the top 2 spots in our grade. Back then, the results for the top 10 students were posted at the front of the classroom after each term exam. Whenever she took first place, she'd ridicule me as if she'd won some grand prize. And when I came out on top, she'd get visibly frustrated, vowing to beat me next time. At first, I would respond, but it got tiring, so eventually, I just let it slide. But Emma kept up her one-sided rivalry, and I never understood why I deserved her scorn. Whenever she insulted me, I just gritted my teeth, waiting for the storm to pass. Seeing her now brought all those unpleasant memories flooding back, so I slipped toward the back of the room, hoping to avoid her. But Emma scanned the room and, catching sight of me, immediately started walking over. Great, she found me. I tried to dodge by talking to someone else, but it was too late. She reached me first. "Oh, Rick, it's been a while. You look well." Yeah, thanks." "You look well too, Emma." "Of course. Keeping healthy is essential, don't you think? By the way, I heard you didn't go to college and are working on a fish farm?" "Well, yeah. That figures." The moment I walked in, I thought I smelled the ocean. As expected, Emma wasted no time throwing out a sarcastic comment, even going so far as to hold her nose while giving a smug little laugh. For some reason, she seemed to know that I worked at a fish farm. Did she dig into my background with her connections as a CEO's daughter? Or maybe she just asked someone here. Either way, whatever. Glancing around, I saw people nervously watching us from a distance. It felt just like old times. And I realized that Emma probably wanted to belittle me, the high school grad, and show off in front of everyone. She grabbed a whiteboard set up for entertainment, writing something on it. I sighed, recognizing this as her typical behavior, unchanged even now. "Hey, everyone. Is there anyone here who can solve this problem?" She called out, and silence fell over the room. Even the event organizer looked uneasy, watching to see how things would unfold. Knowing no one would be able to answer, Emma spun around and looked directly at me. "Oh, that's right. I wonder if Rick, who jumped straight into the workforce with just a high school diploma, can solve this problem." The Miss Tokyo University beauty and CEO's daughter had likely chosen this tough question just to mess with me. The question, a challenging math problem in English, was clearly meant to trip me up. Classmates whispered to each other, "Do you think anyone can solve that?" while consulting those around them. "What are you trying to prove with this out-of-the-blue problem?" I muttered. "Nothing, really." "Oh. But if you get it right, I'll make you president." "No way that's happening. I'm a CEO's daughter, I can make that happen." Or, if you don't want that, I'll do whatever you say. How about that? No excuses, right? She looked triumphantly at me, as if to say, I bet you can't solve this. Her words had the whole room buzzing, and classmates started cheering, caught up in the excitement. Honestly, I didn't care about either prize. But I couldn't walk away from a challenge, so I glanced over the problem. Oh, I see. Did you really think I couldn't solve this? Well, I struggled a bit with this one myself. As good as you were in school, this shouldn't be too easy for you, right? Fine. I'll give you a hint out of kindness, she said with a grin. Actually, I've already solved it, I replied casually. What? I easily wrote out the solution on the whiteboard. By the way, didn't you have something else to say? Nothing at all, she snapped. Really? Anyway, this is the right answer, isn't it? I asked, pointing to my solution. She glanced at the board, eyes wide, and whispered, Yes, it's correct. The crowd burst into cheers, congratulating me. Wow, Rick, that's awesome. You're still as sharp as ever. At that moment, Mr. Thompson, who had been quietly watching, walked over clapping. Well, that was quite entertaining. Oh, Mr. Thompson. I'm so sorry for the scene. Emma stammered, bowing her head. Then, she shot me a glare. Oh, scary. I muttered. No need for that look. Don't worry about it. But you may have picked the wrong opponent. You see, Rick competed as part of the Japanese team in the International Math Olympiad back in high school and won a gold medal. So, a problem like this is no challenge for him. At his words, Emma and the rest of the class turned to me, stunned. Oh, this isn't good. I was just about to say, Mr. Thompson. When? And by the way, Mr. Thompson added, Rick didn't just finish high school. He's a Stanford graduate. Just as I feared, he announced it to everyone. I couldn't help but hold my head in my hands. All eyes in the room turned to me at Mr. Thompson's words. Even Emma looked at me, her eyes wide in surprise. Oh, Mr. Thompson. I muttered. Oh, was that supposed to be a secret? My apologies, he said, smiling as he looked at me. It was clearly an apology without any real regret. Looking around, I noticed my classmates staring at me with wide-eyed admiration. Ow. Resigned, I took a deep breath. And I decided to explain. Well, right before I graduated high school, my grandfather, who ran the fish farm, got sick. With no one else to help him, I decided to skip college to work at the farm. But after my grandfather's health improved, and my dad retired and could help, I was able to step away from work and head to Stanford. I paused for a moment, but my classmates pressed in with more questions. So, what happened next? Why Stanford, specifically? My dad remembered that I'd originally wanted to go to college, so he encouraged me to pursue it. I thought studying would be useful, even if I continued running the farm. Plus, I had a friend from the Math Olympiad who was also studying abroad, which made the idea more appealing. When I finished, the way they looked at me changed instantly, and I was bombarded with even more questions. Are the girls abroad really that cute? What's college like over there? Is it really hard to graduate? I answered as best I could, and as I did, the reunion neared its end. Scanning the room, I looked for Emma. I spotted her just as she was about to leave, so I took a deep breath, walked over, and called out. Hey, Emma, can we talk for a sec? What? When I called out to her, Emma shot me a sharp glare. Ignoring her obvious irritation, I decided to finally ask the question that had been on my mind all these years. So, back in middle school, I always wondered but never asked. Why did you treat me like an enemy? But she said nothing and turned to leave. I reminded her of her earlier words. You said if I answered the question, you'd do anything I asked, right? That made her stop in her tracks. After a pause, she turned to me, sighed deeply, and faced me with a look of resignation. Oh, you didn't need to sigh that heavily. It was during the summer of 7th grade. I went to my dad's office to drop something off, and I saw him kneeling in front of your dad. I was so shocked and humiliated that I ran off without even giving him what I brought. Wait, my dad made your dad kneel? Yes. Later, I saw your dad at school for open house, and I realized that he was the one my dad knelt before. I decided then to avenge my dad. I had no idea that happened. I couldn't find any words in response. Seeing my silence, Emma turned on her heel. And she left the venue without looking back. After returning to work, I decided to ask my dad, who had recently retired from the bank, about what had happened back then. I couldn't shake what Emma had told me and felt compelled to get to the truth. Oh, I remember that well. Mr. Harris suddenly knelt, and I was just as surprised. So, it really happened. Now, don't get the wrong idea. Of course, I immediately told him, please don't kneel. But he insisted, saying, not until you approve the loan. Wait, so you didn't make him do it? I'd never make someone do that. Our bank had already extended a loan of several $100,000 to Harris Foods, and they needed to make monthly payments. But since business was slow back then, Mr. Harris had asked for a deferral of those payments, a loan adjustment. So that's what happened. Dad continued his story, reminiscing about the past. Thanks to the reduced monthly payments, Harris Foods' finances gradually improved. But just as things were getting better, they requested an additional loan for equipment investments. Typically, when a loan is rescheduled, it's difficult to secure more funding. After all, they're already struggling to make regular payments. So granting another loan risks us not recovering the funds, which could spell disaster for the bank. Nodding in understanding, I realized that the kneeling must have happened during that exchange. So, what happened with the additional loan? We approved it. Mr. Harris and I put together a recovery plan, and we managed to secure that extra financing. Wow, Dad, that's impressive. Oh, it's nothing special. But looking back, Harris Foods really took off from there. It's a nostalgic memory. Dad's eyes softened as he spoke. I see. Thanks, Dad. I understand the situation now. Well, good. If you ever have more questions, just let me know. Thanks. I felt relieved, knowing Dad wasn't the type of person to force anyone to kneel. I wanted to clear up Emma's misunderstanding as soon as possible. So I called Harris Foods right away and asked to be connected to her. What do you want? I'm busy, she said coldly. About the other day. Oh? Are you trying to tell me I was wrong? Hearing her irritated tone, I hurried to explain. No, it's not that. There's just something important I want to tell you. Fine. I don't have time right now, but would next Sunday work? Yes, that works. Thank you. We agreed to meet at a cafe near the station on Sunday. I arrived 10 minutes early, ordered an iced coffee, and waited for her. Right on time, Emma entered the cafe. Even in casual clothes, she looked stunning, making my heart skip a beat. At the reunion, she'd worn a chic suit, but today she had on a sleeveless top and slim capri pants, a much more relaxed look. I then shared with her everything Dad had told me. Wait, really? I had no idea that happened. She murmured, visibly taken aback. I was surprised to hear it myself. But that's why I wanted to clear things up with you. I see. I remember my dad was really troubled back then. He even developed a bald spot from stress, and he'd come home late every night. As a kid, I could tell he was under a lot of pressure. Emma looked down, her voice soft. As I wondered what to say, she continued. So, when I saw him kneeling, it really shocked me. I ended up assuming your father must be a terrible person. Well, seeing only that part, anyone might have thought the same, so I get it. But I'm sorry. As long as you know now that my dad isn't like that, it's all good. Yeah. Thanks to you, I understand now. Thank you. I'm glad. I mean, my dad isn't a bad guy, after all. He raised me, even though I'm not his own blood. Wait, what? What do you mean? She asked, looking at me in surprise and leaning in. Oh, I'm not actually my parents' biological child. Are you saying I'm not related by blood to anyone in my family? I was adopted. Emma covered her mouth in shock. So I continued explaining. When I was a baby, my biological parents died in a car accident. My grandparents on both sides were each living alone, barely making ends meet. So they couldn't take me in. That's awful. It is what it is. There was no one to take me in at first, but when my dad heard, he decided to adopt me into the Mitchell family. Apparently, he was my birth father's best friend. So I'm not related by blood to my dad, mom, sister, or even my grandpa. So, that's how it was. While I spoke casually, Emma looked visibly affected, a dark expression crossing her face. I hadn't meant to make her feel that way, and I scratched my head awkwardly. I'm sorry. I had no idea. Of course, you wouldn't. You're actually the first classmate I've ever told. But then, how did you realize that your current parents aren't your biological parents? Well, I noticed something was off right when I started 9th grade. My parents are both type O, and so is my sister. But I'm the only one with type A blood, even though two O-type parents can only have an O-type child, right? She nodded thoughtfully. So, yeah, I was really shaken when I realized I wasn't related by blood. I didn't know if I should even ask my parents about it. I was so stressed out that my grades dropped. Come to think of it, you weren't yourself for a while. Was that why? Yeah. But then, one day, my homeroom teacher, Mr. Thompson, noticed something was up and reached out to me. So I told him about it, that I was the only one in my family with a different blood type. Do you know what he said? Let's see. Emma folded her arms, thinking deeply. The answer was, that's what you're worried about? She laughed. That sounds just like Mr. Thompson, right? But his advice really helped me. Then he said something that stuck with me. The people you think of as your parents are your true parents, Rick. Does blood connection really matter? Even in marriage. People start as strangers, but they become family. You were raised with love in the Mitchell family, if you ask me, that's more than enough. But what do you think, Rick? Emma chuckled warmly. That's so like him. That's something few teachers would be able to say. Right? After that, he talked with my parents, which was a huge help because I didn't know how to bring it up myself. My parents said they'd plan to tell me once I became an adult, but I figured it out first. They must have been so flustered. Oh, they were totally panicking. It's funny looking back on it. Honestly, knowing my origin didn't cause me any turmoil. And that's thanks to Mr. Thompson. I see. But honestly, I think you and your dad look like true father and son. Really? Yeah, you both have the same expression, with your eyes softening when you smile. Ha ha. Guess we started looking alike from living together so long. Emma smiled and said, I'm sure that's the case. Her smile made my heart skip a beat, but I managed to keep the conversation going. Actually, I think I resemble my grandpa more than anyone else. You really love your grandpa, don't you? Yeah, both he and grandma have always been amazing, treating me like a real grandson. That's why I couldn't bear the thought of letting the farm he built go under. I see. I'm sorry for putting down your work. Emma gripped her coffee cup tightly, apologizing. Compared to your struggles, my own worries seem so trivial. I don't think they were trivial at all. No, they were small. And to think, your dad was the one who saved Harris Foods. I can't thank him enough. It was really just a misunderstanding, and I just wanted to clear that up. Even so, I still want to apologize and show my gratitude. Emma leaned forward, saying it so earnestly that I was momentarily taken aback. I managed to reply, carefully choosing my words. Oh, by the way, Dad seemed nostalgic when I mentioned Mr. Harris's name. Then let's do this. Why don't we have dinner at my place sometime soon? Wait, are you sure? Yes, actually, my dad's always been curious about yours. Right after middle school, you moved away so suddenly. At the time, I thought he had some negative reasons, but maybe he was just grateful for everything your family did. Yeah. Let's plan a day. I'll bring Dad along. Please do. Seeing her look so happy made me smile, too. We exchanged contact information right there. A few days later, my dad and I brought some of our finest farm-raised red sea bream and flounder to Harris Foods. When Mr. Harris and my dad met, they shared a firm, heartfelt handshake as they reunited after so long. The four of us ended up drinking and laughing together, forgetting the time. The sake Mr. Harris had prepared was delicious, and I found myself pleasantly buzzed. By the way, my daughter Emma here is already over 30 and still hasn't found herself a boyfriend, Mr. Harris said with a grin. No way. Such a beautiful woman, that's a shame. Though my son Rick here is pretty much in the same boat, my dad chimed in. Dad. Stop it. Seriously, Dad, cut it out. As the conversation unexpectedly turned to dating, Emma blushed and gave her dad a playful slap on the back. I, on the other hand, shot a glare at my own father. Rick, what do you think about my daughter? Mr. Harris asked suddenly. Huh? Oh, come on. Mr. Harris said, chuckling. Nicely said. What do you think, Rick? He added, nudging me. Well, I stammered, caught off guard, my cheeks growing warm. Mr. Harris and my dad exchanged a knowing look and chuckled. Emma gave my shoulder a playful tap and said, Come on, that's not an answer. I rubbed my shoulder, shooting her a look, but she just pretended not to notice. Watching her, I thought maybe, just maybe, we had a pretty good connection after all. It was a night filled with laughter and unexpected warmth. "Hey, kid, would you let me work here?" Those words left me speechless. In front of me was an elderly man in a wheelchair, clearly advanced in age. The idea that he wanted to work seemed like a joke. No, I mean, you really shouldn't push yourself." Sensing my hesitation, the old man smiled softly and shook his head. "It's fine. I'll work for just 50 cents a day. I've got something I want to do here." This mysterious old man appeared before me right after I had lost both my mother and grandmother. Little did I know that this man would turn my life upside down. And his true identity was, "My name is Jake, and I'm 27. I had lived with my mother and grandmother for as long as I could remember. Even though it was a single-parent household, my mother and grandmother were always bright and full of smiles. Jake, look at this. Oh yeah, it's ripening nicely. Want to pick this tomato, Jake? Yeah. I'll do it." I naturally started helping with farming, which became both our livelihood and the center of our lives. We weren't rich, but the vegetables and fruits we grew in our small field provided us with a fulfilling life. "Mom, today's tomatoes are super sweet. Right? This year's harvest seems especially good." "I'm glad. Sorry for always making you help, Jake. But Grandma and I will take care of the field, so you should enjoy being a kid, playing and studying." Those simple conversations were my happiness. After graduating high school, I left home and became an office worker. "Are you sure about skipping college?" My mom and grandma repeatedly asked if I was really okay with not going to college when I told them I wanted to work after graduation. It's not that I hated studying, but I didn't feel a strong urge to keep doing it either. More than anything, I just wanted to make life easier for the two of them as quickly as possible. Farming is tough work. You're always dealing with nature, and the physical labor is often grueling. I wanted to start earning money as soon as possible. "I'm home. Grandma, Mom." My job was a bit far, so I had to move out. Honestly, living alone for the first time was lonely. And as I faced the challenges of working, there were many days when I felt like I might break down. But knowing that my two favorite people were always waiting for me to come home kept me going. On weekends, I'd return home, and we'd share meals made from the vegetables they'd grown. Those moments brought me peace. What? What did you just say? But one day, when I was 26, fate suddenly took away the two most important people in my life. The police informed me that my mother and grandmother had died in a car accident, and I couldn't process the reality. Why did this happen? I remember standing frozen after receiving that call from the police. Time passed in a blur with funerals and paperwork. "Thank you so much." I bowed my head and saw off the people who had come to the funeral. Then I returned to my childhood home for the first time in a while. I couldn't just wallow in grief, I needed to start cleaning up the house. "I'm home." The familiar, cheerful voices welcoming me back were no longer there. I deeply regretted not having done more for them while they were alive. I should have shown more gratitude to my mom and grandma. Now, my childhood home no longer carried the warmth it once did, but instead confronted me with the cold, harsh reality. I should have realized sooner. But now, it's too late. When I walked into the living room, the walls were crowded with pictures of me. There was my beaming smile as a child, the slightly surprised look on my face when I first learned to ride a bike, and photos from my elementary, middle, and high school entrance and graduation ceremonies. Each one was a testament to how much my mother and grandmother cherished me. As the memories of being loved came flooding back, my heart warmed. They loved me so much. Tears welled up and streamed down my face uncontrollably. The loss of both of them felt unreal, and the regret of not being able to repay their kindness weighed heavily on my heart. If only I had expressed my gratitude more, so much more. I should have kept showing it, whether through words or gifts. I stood frozen, unable to stop the tears. After crying for what felt like forever in the living room, I noticed the room my mom and grandma used as an office. There are so many papers. I had always known it as their workroom, and I never really went inside. But when I entered, I found the desk piled high with documents. Contracts related to farm work and bills I had never seen before were scattered around. What were they dealing with all this time? I started going through the papers, but I couldn't even tell which ones were important or necessary. Still, I kept reading and trying to figure out the contracts. Thinking about what my mother and grandmother must have felt as they continued farming, always with a smile, while working in this room. It makes my chest ache. Ouch, my shoulders are stiff. After hours of sorting through the papers, a thick file caught my eye. Inside were detailed records of transactions, income, and expenses. What I found was shocking. I had no idea the farm was in such bad shape. The income was meager, while the expenses were overwhelming. On top of that, there were unpaid taxes. And it wasn't just one or two. Why did they keep this struggle hidden from me? While I was living my carefree life, what must they have been feeling as they worked? The thought of their burden made my chest tighten. Even though things were so tough, they kept working hard for me. I had no idea how much effort they had put in. I didn't know what they had gone through to keep this farm going. As I stood there, faced with this harsh reality, I began to think about what I should do. After much reflection, I made my decision. I would quit my job and return home. I resolved to start farming from scratch, to protect the land my mother and grandmother had cherished. If I couldn't repay them in life, at least I can protect this land. But the reality was harsh. I only knew bits and pieces about farming, things my mom and grandma had casually taught me, and I didn't really understand the details. Still, I thought I could manage somehow. But standing in the field, I realized I had no idea where to start. Well, I guess I'll just have to try. I grabbed the shovel and stabbed it into the ground. And just like that, the handle snapped off. Great! Is there a spare somewhere? I headed to the shed where the farming tools were stored, intending to take some out. I looked around the dusty space. Once I took a good look inside, I saw that most of the tools were falling apart. Many of them were unusable, likely due to lack of proper maintenance. I'll have to take care of these too. With so much to do everywhere, I felt overwhelmed and exhausted, eventually crouching down on the spot. I let out a sigh, but even then, I didn't want to give up. I started watching farming videos on YouTube and reading books. Gradually, I began to build up my knowledge of farming. But, of course, knowledge alone wasn't enough. I lacked the physical strength, skills, and experience, everything, really. Why is this so difficult? I worked tirelessly every day, but there was hardly any harvest, and the farm continued to run in the red. Then, one day, something happened. In the crisp morning air, I was walking towards the field as usual. My body, still unaccustomed to farm work, was a bit tired, but I had no choice but to keep going. But that morning, I saw something different. There was someone sitting at the edge of the field. Who is that? Do I know anyone around here who uses a wheelchair? The person sitting there was an elderly man in a wheelchair. I racked my brain, trying to recall if any of the neighbors fit the description, but I couldn't think of anyone. As I slowly approached, I decided to speak to him. Feeling a bit nervous, I carefully walked up to the old man and greeted him. Good morning. Can I help you with something? After a moment, the old man slowly turned to me and gave a gentle smile. Good morning. It's a beautiful day, isn't it? Yes, it is. Good morning. I felt a little flustered by his greeting. Who is this man? Why is he here? A brief silence followed as I wondered. Hey, kid, would you let me work here? Those words left me stunned and speechless. In front of me was an elderly man in a wheelchair, clearly advanced in age. The idea that he wanted to work seemed absurd. No, you really shouldn't push yourself. Sensing my hesitation, the old man smiled softly and shook his head. It's fine. I'll work for just 50 cents a day. I've got something I want to do here. His words only added to my confusion. 50 cents a day sounded like a joke, and I had no idea what he meant by having something he wanted to do here. I couldn't understand why he was interested in this field. The soil was becoming quite poor. But why this remote farm? The old man looked at me for a moment before smiling again. Kid, this field still holds a lot of potential. I can see it. So, will you let me help? His serious gaze made me hesitate for a moment. It was true that the field was in rough shape, and I couldn't handle it on my own. But I didn't want to let him overexert himself. But, please, don't push yourself. Farming takes a lot of physical strength, and there are risks too. The old man raised his hand to stop me mid-sentence. Don't worry. You're struggling too, aren't you? Let me help with what I can. Besides, I've got a bit of knowledge and experience. His words made me stop and think deeply for a moment. Then, I happened to notice his hands. Though a bit worn, they were large and strong hands that had worked hard. They reminded me of my grandmother's and mother's hands. At that moment, I felt a natural sense of wanting to accept his help. May I ask your name? The old man paused, seeming to think for a bit. Just call me Doc, he said with a playful grin. I couldn't help but laugh a little. Doc? Yes. My name isn't important. His response surprised me, but there was something about his mysterious air that made me not want to question it further. In the end, I agreed. Understood. In that case, I'll pay you $4,000 a month. 50 cents a day isn't going to work. So, please, help me. I said that and gave Doc a big smile. And so, our partnership began, Doc and I, working together side by side. From that day forward, Doc started taking care of the tools daily, and one by one, the unusable equipment was restored. His skill was remarkable, so much so that, while I stood by in amazement, he even managed to repair the broken tractor. Wow! How do you know so much? When I asked in awe, Doc smiled and said, It's the wisdom of age. Plus, when you've farmed as long as I have, this much is second nature. His humble attitude made me even more grateful for his presence. The thought crossed my mind that Doc might be someone special. But since he never brought it up, I felt it would be rude to pry, so I kept my curiosity to myself. One day, while working silently, Doc began mixing manure and fertilizer. What are you making? Compost. If we spread this over the field, the soil will come back to life. The earth is a living thing too. Give it the nutrients it needs, and the crops will flourish. Following his advice, I spread the compost over the field. In the days that followed, I noticed subtle changes in the field. The soil became softer, and the crops looked healthier and more vibrant. The effects of Doc's care were visible, it felt like magic. I can't believe we're seeing results this quickly. Take care of the soil and it will repay you. Now, just keep up with the maintenance. As the days went by, I started learning the essence of farming from Doc's words and actions. The field improved day by day, and little by little, we began to see progress. Then, 2 weeks after Doc had arrived, a phone call came into the office that would change everything. The call was from Robert, a renowned chef who ran a famous restaurant in Tokyo. Robert frequently appeared on cooking shows and was one of the most celebrated chefs of the time. I'm sorry for the sudden call. Recently, I bought some tomatoes from your farm at a roadside market, and I was amazed by the taste. It brought back memories of the flavors I knew as a child. Hearing his words made my heart race with excitement. Really? Thank you so much. Robert went on to say that he wanted to use our tomatoes in his restaurant. It was an order larger than anything I had ever imagined. Thank you. I can't believe our tomatoes are being praised like this. I'll get them ready right away and deliver them to you. After hanging up the phone, I rushed to tell Doc the news. Listen, Doc. We just got a call from a famous restaurant in Tokyo. They want to use our tomatoes. Doc listened, then smiled gently and nodded. That's great. Your hard work is paying off. No way. I haven't done anything. This is all thanks to you. Doc seemed a little embarrassed by my words. I felt a deep sense of gratitude and respect for Doc as his words sank in. In that moment, I realized that both this farm and my life were being saved because of him. Since supplying the tomatoes to Robert's restaurant, the phone at the office hadn't stopped ringing. Orders were pouring in not just from the local area but from outside the prefecture as well. Not only the tomatoes, but the summer vegetables Doc had worked on were gaining a reputation. Wow, another order just came in. The tomato orders just won't stop. I was loading up boxes of freshly harvested vegetables from the field, overwhelmed but thrilled by the demand. It was exhausting to keep up with the constant calls, but deep down, I couldn't have been happier. I wished my mother and grandmother could see the farm as it was now. If only Doc had come while they were still alive. But there's no point in thinking about what ifs. I murmured quietly, shaking off the sentimental thoughts and returning to my work. Just then, I felt someone's gaze and looked up to see Doc smiling at me with a reassuring expression. Doc, what's up? When I asked, Doc simply shook his head and smiled. Oh, nothing. Just thinking how hard you're working. Hard-working guys like you will be popular, you know. He let out a hearty laugh, and in that moment, I felt a strange tug at my chest. It was a familiar expression. Where have I seen that before? But I couldn't quite place it, leaving a vague sense of unease lingering in the back of my mind. The feeling only lasted a moment. Never mind, I can't figure it out. And no way. I'm not popular, don't tease me like that. I puffed out my cheeks a little, and Doc laughed even more. That afternoon, while I was doing paperwork in the office, Samuel, a fellow farmer, stopped by to check in. Samuel is the person who lives closest to me. He's been my neighbor for as long as I can remember. Hey, Jake. Your vegetables are making quite a name for themselves, aren't they? I came by to see what all the fuss is about. How did this happen so suddenly? Samuel looked puzzled, so I proudly explained. Actually, I got some major help. Honestly, it's all thanks to him. Help? Yeah, his name is Doc. At the mention of Doc, Samuel looked confused. Want to take a look at the farm? When Samuel eagerly agreed, we headed outside together. As we walked, we spotted Doc working in the distance. When we got close enough for Samuel to see his face, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. "Ha! What's wrong?" Samuel didn't respond, his eyes fixed on document. Why is he here?" Samuel shouted in surprise and rushed over to Doc. "Hey! Is that really you, Kenneth?" "You're Kenneth, aren't you?" I was stunned by Samuel's words. "Kenneth?" I had suspected Doc wasn't his real name, but I never imagined Samuel would know him. But more than that, the words "you're back" stuck in my mind. Wait, what's going on? "Samuel, you know Doc? Know him?" "Of course I do." "Wait, Kenneth, you didn't tell Jake?" As both Samuel and I voiced our questions, Doc let out a small sigh. "Samuel, I didn't expect to be found like this." Doc smiled wryly and fell silent, seemingly deep in thought. Finally, he began to speak. "I suppose it's time I tell you the truth. If you don't mind, could we sit down and talk inside?" As I waited for his words, my heart raced. I had avoided asking about Doc's true identity all this time, but in this moment, everything was about to be revealed. We moved to the living room, and together with Samuel, we listened to Kenneth's story. I sat there, tense, straining to hear every word this man in front of me was about to say. "To be honest, this might come as a shock, but I'm your grandfather, Jake." The moment I heard those words, I was so stunned I couldn't speak. The grandfather I never knew existed was right in front of me. I'd grown up without any knowledge of him, and I had always assumed I didn't have a grandfather. I was too overwhelmed to say anything, and seeing that, he continued. "I studied agriculture in college a long time ago and started farming on this land myself. Grandfather had been a renowned agricultural researcher, but he also loved working with his hands, connecting with the soil. He met my grandmother, and together they lived a life of farming. I met your grandmother here, and we got married. Those were truly happy days. Every day was fulfilling. We spent all our time working the fields together from morning till night." As he spoke, he smiled fondly at the memories. "That's right, Jake. The two of them were really inseparable." "They were famous for it around here," Samuel added. "I see." Grandfather seemed a little embarrassed by Samuel's comment. But as he moved on to the next part of his story, his expression darkened. "One day, I got a call from the university, asking if I'd return to continue my research. I was torn, because I loved research. But before I could make up my mind, your grandmother told me to go. At the time, your mother, Mary, was still young. But I chose to go back to the university." I listened quietly. Mary was my mother's name. To think he went back to university when my mother was still so young. My grandmother must have had an incredibly hard time. And yet, I had no idea my grandfather had taken such a path in life. But why didn't you stay with them?" "It was a university far enough away that I had to take a plane. At first, I made time to come back, but eventually, I got so absorbed in my research that I started drifting away from my family." Regret was clear in my grandfather's voice as he spoke those words. Looking back, it was true that he had been able to fully pursue the research he loved, and that must have been fulfilling for him. But my grandmother, left to handle everything alone, must have had an incredibly hard time. Housework, raising a child, and farming. Even for a man, farming by himself would have been tough enough. I deeply regret it. I should have come home more often, paid more attention to my family. It was my mother, he said, who was most upset with him for staying away. As she grew older and realized the situation at home, she sided firmly with my grandmother. I could imagine how painful it must have been for her, never having her father around for birthdays, school events, or anything important. Mom was so heartbroken. When she was in middle school, she had enough and lashed out at him. My grandfather recalled how she'd yelled at him over the phone. Even though this all happened before I was born, I was shocked to hear about it. In the end, I failed to take care of my family. We lived apart for many years, though we never officially divorced. I see. I didn't know any of that. But what about the wheelchair? Grandfather quietly began to explain. I've only been in a wheelchair for the past 2 years. When I was fully immersed in my research at the university, I was overworked, staying late into the night with experiments and studies. My body couldn't keep up, and one day, I collapsed from exhaustion. Unfortunately, I was at the top of a flight of stairs. Grandfather had pushed himself to the limit and collapsed. Since it happened at the top of the stairs, he fell all the way down. That's when he injured his spine. Despite undergoing surgery, he lost the use of his legs and was confined to a wheelchair. I debated whether to tell them about it. Suddenly calling after all those years to say I was now in a wheelchair. I agonized over it. But no answer came. After all the years I'd stayed silent, I feared they might ask, "So what?" In the end, I never reached out to them. A look of anguish appeared on my grandfather's face. Even now, it seemed he was still searching for the right answer, wondering what he could have done differently. After the accident, I thought about so many things. Should I go back home and do what farming I could? Or should I return to the university, which was willing to accommodate me in a wheelchair? I was torn. But in the end, I felt like I hadn't finished my research, and I needed just a little more time. So, I wrote a letter to the two of them. I never got a reply, though. His voice was filled with frustration and regret. He had wanted to come home, yet he chose to keep pursuing his dream. And before he knew it, time had slipped away. Caught between wanting to repair his family relationships and his passion for research, he had been stuck in limbo. And then, I completed my research. I was satisfied with the results. I finally worked up the courage to return home. But just as I made that decision, I got the news that your mother and grandmother had passed away. My grandfather's voice trembled. And so did his hands. Years of putting off coming home had resulted in the loss of his beloved wife and daughter. I couldn't even begin to imagine the depth of that pain. I wanted to rush back immediately. But my body, weakened by illness, wouldn't cooperate. More than that, I was overwhelmed by a sense of helplessness. I hadn't been there for them, hadn't done anything for them. How could I possibly face this house again? Did I even have the right to return? That feeling, he said, had kept him from moving. As he whispered those words, my grandfather looked so small. Then, I heard from others that you had taken over the farm. I heard that you were protecting the fields on your own. That was the only thing that gave me any comfort. So, I decided to return, even if it was too late. I thought that if there was anything I could still do, I'd do it. Even if you couldn't forgive me, Jake. Hearing his words, I was overcome with emotion. The fact that my grandfather, now in a wheelchair and having kept his distance from the family for so long, had returned like this. It was a sign that he was facing his past and trying to make amends. Samuel nodded quietly in understanding. So that's what it was, Kenneth. You've been carrying that regret all this time. Grandfather lowered his gaze slightly and continued. It wasn't until I lost the people I cherished most that I realized what I'd done. But by then, I didn't have the courage to come back. You were the only one left. My grandson. I couldn't abandon you. But I couldn't bear to call myself your grandfather, so I became Doc. Hearing my grandfather's feelings, my heart felt full. For a while, I sat in silence, listening to his words, unsure of where to begin. There were so many emotions swirling inside me, too many to easily put into words. But as I looked at my grandfather sitting there in front of me, I felt the need to speak the feelings in my heart, just as he had done for me. Thank you for coming back. The words flowed out naturally. I had thought I would be on my own forever. With my grandmother and mother gone, I'd felt like I had no family left. My estranged father had passed away as well. But now, sitting here in front of me, was my grandfather. That fact alone was a source of immense relief. I'm really happy. Because now I know I'm not alone anymore. With Grandma and Mom gone, I thought I had no one left to call family. I could see tears welling up in my grandfather's eyes. After taking a deep breath, I began to speak to him. As I listened to my grandfather's story, a memory from my childhood resurfaced. I wanted to share that memory with him. I remembered something. When I was little, I asked Grandma about you. At my words, my grandfather looked at me in surprise. I could see a hint of worry in his eyes. He was probably anxious about what my grandmother had told me about him. I remember asking Grandma once, all my friends have grandpas, but I don't. Why don't I have a grandpa? I've never forgotten how she answered. I followed the memory as I shared it with my grandfather. She smiled gently and said, Jake's grandpa is studying hard to make sure the vegetables grow delicious for everyone. I saw deep emotion on my grandfather's face. I still remember the look on her face when she said it. Looking back now, she seemed so proud and happy. I felt proud too, knowing my grandpa was doing something so special. For a moment, my grandfather didn't say anything. My grandfather listened quietly, seemingly absorbing every word I said. Then, gradually, large tears began to fall from his eyes. Seeing this, my heart filled to the brim. How had I forgotten this memory for so long? I wondered if, had I spoken of my grandfather more often, it might have softened things between my mother, grandmother, and him. Thank you. She truly was an incredible woman. I've come this far because of her support. Even now, I'm so deeply grateful. His words warmed my heart. Perhaps to others, and even to my mother, our family seemed unconventional. And I owe your mother an apology. His voice carried a deep sense of regret. Hearing about how he had once left his family behind to immerse himself in research now felt like a distant past. It's okay. Mom could be pretty stubborn. I think, deep down, she wanted to see you again. That's what I believe. With my grandfather here now, I had no desire to blame him. Grandpa, thank you so much for coming back. Let's keep working together on this farm. I still have a lot to learn, but I'm happy to have you here with me. You know, I always wanted a grandpa. I was jealous of the kids who had one. My grandfather nodded quietly at my words. He then rolled his wheelchair closer to me and gently took my hand. His hand was, as always, knobby and strong. Tanned from the sun, with small scars from years of hard work. I squeezed his hand firmly in return. It was warm, and it filled me with a deep sense of reassurance. I'm so grateful that you've been taking care of this farm and this home. Now, we'll be able to bring new life to this land together. That's the greatest joy I could ask for. Do you think they'll forgive me? Your mother and grandmother? Hearing that, I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. Though the sadness of losing my grandmother and mother would never disappear, reconnecting with my grandfather had brought a new sense of hope. Of course. They'll say, "Welcome home. They've been waiting for you, Grandpa." As I confidently reassured him, he wiped away his tears. Samuel, meanwhile, had been crying so hard that I couldn't tell when he had started. That's wonderful. Truly wonderful. If there's anything I can do, just say the word. If you need more hands, I'll rally the others. Really? Thank you so much. Thank you, Samuel. I'll be counting on you. No matter what challenges might come our way, I knew we could overcome them together. With that belief, I firmly decided to move forward with my grandfather by my side. Thank you. Let's keep working hard together, Grandpa. I squeezed his hand even tighter. And so, my grandfather and I worked as a team, finally getting the farm back on track. We began receiving orders for our vegetables from all over the country, and before long, we had paid off all the debt that had once burdened us. Both financially and emotionally, we had found stability. Hey, Jake. Come over here. What is it, Grandpa? Every day, my grandfather watched over the fields with care, while I followed closely behind, taking on the work. After we discovered our family bond, there was a brief period where we weren't sure how to act around each other. But now, that awkwardness was long gone. After all, we were the only family we had left. Even though we had been apart for so long, we had restored the bond between us. In the quiet joy of each day, we lived our lives with gratitude. I'm here to help. Since then, Samuel had started coming over to lend a hand whenever he had free time. To be honest, with all the orders pouring in, we didn't have enough people to handle the harvest. Not only did Samuel come, but he also introduced others to help out. The farm, which had once been run by me alone, was now bustling with people coming and going. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Together, we worked hard, sweating as we harvested the vegetables. Farming was tough and physically demanding, but I loved the feeling of working up a sweat. Look, Grandpa. It's another beautiful day. The sky is so clear. You're right. It really is a beautiful day. We all stood for a moment, gazing at the bright blue sky. The air was fresh, and the breeze felt nice. With each day filled with small, simple joys, we walked through the fields, laughing together. This became our new everyday life.